Edgar Wright is one of my favourite directors. He has made some of the most culturally impactful films of our day, with movies like Shaun of the Dead, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and Hot Fuzz. And as a Marvel geek, I was surprised to find out that he was going to make an Antman movie. I think his editing and action style would have made for some of the best action scenes in the MCU. Fight scenes that Wright filmed, like in The World's End, prove my point. I mean, I know damn well Edgar Wright would have gave us a better movie than Antman Quantumania. But then I started to question, why didn't he finish directing the movie? That's what I want to look at today. Okay, so we have to start way back, before Iron Man, before the MCU was even a thing. Back in the early days of Marvel, 2003 to be exact, Edgar Wright and Joel Cornish wrote a treatment for the character of Antman while working with Artisan Entertainment. However, Wright believed that the treatment was never sent to Marvel. The film rights to Antman reverted back to Marvel following Lionsgate's purchase of Artisan at the end of 2003. Still wanting to make the film, in 2004 Edgar Wright met Kevin Feige and Avi Arad at Comic-Con. Around this time, the producers were setting up Marvel Studios as a self-financing company and discussed making an Antman movie part of their ambitious blockbuster lineup. In July 2006, at Marvel Studios' first ever Comic-Con panel, plans were announced for an impressive slate of produced films, with Wright in attendance to confirm that he will direct and co-write an Antman movie. Wright reveals that his storyline will be, and I quote,
"A prologue where you see Henry Pym as Ant-Man in action in the 60s, in Tales to Astonish mode, and then the contemporary flash-forward is Scott Lang's story, and how he comes to acquire the suit, how he crosses paths with Pym."
Around this time, other Marvel films were being confirmed for the lineup, including Jon Favreau's Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Captain America, a solo Nick Fury movie, and Thor. In March 2008, Wright reveals that he and Joel Cornish have completed the first draft of their Ant-Man script and were working on the second. The filmmaker described it as a more serious film than his previous movies that he directed. He said, and I quote,
"A full-on action-adventure sci-fi film, but with a comedic element."
In May 2011, Wright and Cornish revealed that they have completed the second draft of the Ant-Man script. Cornish confirmed to Digital Spy during promotional runs for Attack the Block that a reference to the character was cut from Thor. In July 2011, Wright confirms that a third draft of the Ant-Man script had been completed, adding that the blockbuster was intended as a standalone genre film that didn't require the wider knowledge of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In July 2012, Wright shoots a test reel for the film, displaying Ant-Man in action. The clip is shown at Comic-Con. This was our first look at what Wright intended for the character, in terms of how the character was going to use his powers and the heist feel that Wright wanted. In October 2012, Marvel Studios and Disney dated Ant-Man for a release on November 6, 2015. The film would have followed Avengers Age of Ultron and would have been the first film in Phase 3. In June 2013, during a press for The World's End, Wright confirms to Digital Spy he and Cornish have completed the third script. The director could have made the film in 2011, but Marvel allowed him to delay it so he could make The World's End. For producer Eric Fellner, he was unfortunately diagnosed with cancer. In August 2013, Wright confirms that his script had been tailored to fit the larger MCU, but added that the film would operate largely on its own terms. He said, and I quote,
"It is pretty standalone in the way we're linking it to the others. I like to make it standalone because I think the premise of it needs time. I want to put the crazy premise of it into a real world, which is why I think Iron Man really works, because it's a relatively simple universe. It's relatable."
In December 2013, Paul Rudd was announced to be the lead for Scott Lang. He beat Joseph Gordon-Levitt for the role. In January 2014, Marvel confirms that Michael Douglas in the role of Hank Pym, along with the rest of the cast. In May 2014, Wright suddenly departures from Ant-Man. Marvel released a statement saying the reason for their split, saying it was due to creative differences in their vision for the film. Speculation pointed towards story problems, with the script being taken away from Wright and Cornish and given to two unknown Marvel writers to revise. The film would later be directed by Peyton Reed to finish what Wright had started. Now that we know the backstory of what led to Edgar Wright no longer being a part of the Antman movie, I want to give my opinion of what happened. When you watch the first Antman, you can see Edgar Wright's directing style throughout the movie, with the fast cuts and the comedic tone. They tried to recreate his style in the second Antman movie, but you can tell that Edgar Wright had nothing to do with it. After doing some research, I found out that Wright's version was envisioned as a dual narrative focused on both Hank Pym and Scott Lang, with a strong mentor-pupil dynamic. I think that this emphasises that his approach was to blend witty, rapid-fire comedy with a high-stakes heist elements, which would have set it apart from the standard Marvel formula. His treatment offered a gritty yet playful take on the character, who was at heart a reformed thief. I think Edgar Wright's version of Scott Lang would have been actually a criminal. Even though in the MCU he was a criminal, I think Edgar Wright's version would have actually been a horrible person, but by the end of the movie he would have had a redemption arc, making him a good person. And I think Hank Pym would have taught him the meaning of being a hero instead of a criminal. I think it's important to keep in mind that when Edgar Wright first signed on to make the Ant-Man movie, the MCU hadn't kicked off yet, so I think Edgar Wright was under the impression that he'd be able to make an Antman movie with no strings attached, meaning it wasn't going to be connected to a larger universe. I think that the creative differences were that Wright didn't want other MCU characters or references in the movie, so I could imagine that Falcon wouldn't have made it into the movie, and I don't think they would have referenced Age of Ultron as well. I think when you listen to the quotes that Edgar Wright was giving, it's clear to me that he wanted to make an Ant-Man movie before the MCU was established, and Marvel saw this and was like, you can make an Ant-Man movie, but it has to be connected to a larger universe, and I think that's where the disagreement formed. Edgar Wright to me seems like a director that once he has a story in mind, he wants to tell that story and he's not going to be swayed. But damn, could you imagine an Edgar Wright Ant-Man trilogy? That's the trilogy we should have gotten. I feel like this brings in a large discussion of Marvel not letting filmmakers tell the story they want to tell. It's clear that Edgar Wright didn't work well with the Marvel machine, but I can't help to think that if Edgar Wright had made the movie that he wanted, the Ant-Man trilogy would be in a way better place than it is now. And again, I think you can tell the difference in quality with the first Ant-Man movie and the second. This is just my opinion, but I think you can really tell that Edgar Wright basically finished the Ant-Man movie. They just made some alterations to it. I really think that Marvel should have let Edgar Wright finish the film, because this is the same director that made Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and you're telling me we could have had that type of action in Ant-Man. And this is not me dissing Peyton Reed, but I think when you look at the two directors, you can see a big quality difference. But nowadays I feel like Marvel is getting better at letting directors tell unique stories that resonates with them. I feel like after Marvel lost Edgar Wright, they made an effort to let directors show their vision more, with directors like James Gunn and Ryan Coogler making some of the best MCU films. I think they learned the lesson. I mean, I feel really bad for Edgar Wright, because meeting Kevin Feige in 2006 to announce an Ant-Man movie to go alongside with Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, which made sense because Ant-Man and the Wasp were founding members of the Avengers. Then to wait years and years and years for only the studio to rewrite your script. I mean, I found a quote by Edgar Wright and it reads,
I wanted to make a Marvel movie, but I don't think they really wanted to make an Edgar Wright movie. I was the writer-director on it, and then they wanted to do draft without me, and having written all my other movies. That's a tough thing to move forward thinking if I do one of these movies I would like to be the writer-director. Suddenly becoming a director for hire on it. You're sort of less emotionally invested and you start to wonder why you're there, really.
I think this puts into perspective of why the movie never got made. But who knows, maybe Edgar Wright would be interested in directing another Marvel superhero film. Me personally, if I had to pick one superhero, I would say Edgar Wright would be good at directing Captain Britain, and yes, it's because he's British. Now, in all seriousness, I think Edgar Wright would bring his charm to Captain Britain. I also think his editing style would lend well for the character. But let me know in the comments what other Marvel characters Edgar Wright should direct a movie for. And also let me know, would you have liked to see this Edgar Wright Ant-Man movie? I know I would have, but if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.